Hello and welcome to my recap of Classics month on the channel. I tasked myself to watch as many well-known classic films as I could last month. So here we go. By the way, I'm sorry for this being out super late. I'm a little bit burnt out on end of month videos, I'm not gonna lie. I'll explain that at the end of this video. And also I got a water infection. So the first thing I watched last month was Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I felt like this is Tarantino's most messy and disjointed film of what I've seen from his filmography. There was voiceovers in random places, there were some really odd edits where I actually thought my TV was lagging out. And I don't think all of these stories really came together in a satisfying way. I think Margot Robbie did a great performance in here, but her character felt so out of place and she didn't really impact the main story of the actor and the stunt double. I do like the main story of this actor who feels like his career is dying and desperately wants someone to notice him for his work. And the stunt double side plot is fun as well, as he makes enemies with the hippies and it ends in a really great final act. Overall, it is the weakest out of the Tarantino films I've seen, but still a Tarantino film, if you know what I mean. There's a lot of dirty feet in here as well. I give it a 7.5. And then I watched Zodiac. This was a Fincher film that I really wanted to watch, mainly because of the cast, but I just didn't get around to it till now. The plot is really engaging and it's just great following these people who are trying to find the titular Zodiac killer. It's really mad that these events were actually based on a true story and that no one was 100% identified as the killer. Jake Gyllenhaal does a great performance in the lead, and I really like how this case that is not even related to his job eventually overtakes him and almost drives him insane. There's some really well done shots in here as well that make these killing scenes even more disturbing. I do think the third act does get a bit confusing because there are like a million names that are constantly thrown about and it's a bit hard to remember who's who, but overall it's a near perfect Fincher film. I give it a 9.5. And then I watched Blade Runner. I watched the fan edit penultimate cut of this film, which is like a regrading of the final cut to make it look like how it originally looked, because the grading of the final cut is like not great, it's like really blue. But I really like this film overall. I know a lot of people think this film is overrated and everything, but I really think it deserves a greatest film of all time status, mainly because of the absolutely insane visuals that baffle me sometimes at how well they were done for the time. I like Harrison Ford as a character and how he is conflicted about his job and the humanity inside of these robots he has to kill. I also think this world is built out really well and you get a lot of shots in here that just let you take in this future. I give it a 9.5. I thought it was really solid. And then I watched School of Rock. I've seen bits and pieces of this film when it's on TV, but I didn't fully watch this film and I kind of regret not watching this sooner. It's one of those films where I wish I had nostalgia for it. This film is just so fun front to back and there's just so many satisfying moments as his classes learn to play their instruments. Jack Black was just so perfect for this role and he just brings so much energy to every scene, and I love that big emotional payoff his character as in the final act. It's just such a solid film. It's another 9.5. And then I watched another Richard Linklater film, same director of School of Rock. I watched Hitman, and I like this film almost as equally. Glenn Powell does a great performance in this film, and in the trailers the real hooking point is that he dresses up as a bunch of different characters as he works undercover with the police, but this film is just so much more than that. The plot gets thicker and thicker as the film goes on and it spirals out of control, but in a really good way. The film can be also very funny when it wants to be, but it can also have some really tense, edge of your seat moments. I don't think the directorial style of Linklater shines through in here as much as School of Rock, but that's really my only big complaint. I really love this film, and it's just one of my favourites of the year. I give it a 9. And then I watched Before Sunrise. This is yet another film from the same director, and it's another very different film. This film is mostly just two people walking and talking, and it's somehow extremely interesting. The chemistry that Ethan Hawke and Julie Depley have in there is great, and you really feel like this relationship is blooming in front of you. I think it's a very casual film as well, and I don't feel like I have to have my eyes glued to the screen to understand everything going on, which is sometimes a good thing. It's just a very simple love story, executed really well. I give it an 8. And then I watched Before Sunset. I was actually much more interested in this film than the last, and I think it's just the overall better film. I really like how it takes place years after the first and focuses on these two people catching up again, and it's just really interesting hearing the events that happen between these 2 years and how their life has changed since then. I think it also works with a shorter runtime of under an hour and a half, as it gives these characters just about the right time to get to know them more and make them even more likeable and human than they were in the last film. I do think it ended a bit abruptly, but apart from that I really loved it. I give it a 9. And then I watched Before Midnight. This might actually be my favourite out of the trilogy. I didn't expect the story to go in the direction that it did in this film, but it really works. And again, it's like we're catching up on these two characters' lives as almost a decade has gone by since the last film. I do think some scenes were drug out slightly too long, like the dinner scene, but some of the scenes really needed that extra length. And it's insane how these two actors have so much chemistry to pull off these like 5-minute uncut shots. The final act of this film is just so heartbreaking, but I feel like it's the only way this trilogy could have ended, really. And it really shows the reality of relationships and how it usually isn't a happily ever after situation. I give it another 9. And then I saw the TV Glow. This is a very ambiguous film, but I really liked how ambiguous it was. This feels more like a piece of art than a film, where a lot of people can view it in very different ways, and I do really like when a film does that. It's mostly being seen as an allegory for transitioning, and when I finished watching the film, I walked through the scenes in my head through this lens, and it does really work in that sense. I really love the imagery of this film as well. The lighting of this whole thing gives off this very unsettling feeling, which feels present for the whole film. There's also some very horrific imagery associated with this show, and I doubt anyone would have the balls to actually end a show in the way that they did in this film. I just really liked it. I give it an 8.5. And then Problemista. I heard this was a great film from this year, so I gave it a watch, and it's now my top 5 of the year. This film just has so much creativity pouring out of it, as well as some great performances from the lead, as well as Tilda Swinton. I just love the relationship between these two characters and how she is a proper boomer and a Karen, just gets set off by everything. But I like how it delves into her reasoning and why she is the way she is. The main character is also very interesting as well, and it's really hard seeing him constantly struggle to stay in America as an immigrant, and you desperately want him to succeed. I like the science fiction aspect of the film as well, with the cryogenic freezing thing, and it makes for an extremely satisfying payoff in that final scene. It's just a great debut from this director, and I'm excited to see what he does next. I give it a 9. And then I watched Edward Scissorhands. I wanted to go back to a bit of Tim Burton to watch his most popular film. I remember watching the final 20 minutes of this film when it was on TV as a child, and I was rooting for the townspeople because all I saw was someone with scissors for hands cutting a bunch of people up and pushing this guy off a building. But watching it from the start, I obviously sympathised with Edward way more, and it's just a really great tragedy of a film. It's really great watching Edward explore this neighbourhood for the first time, and the style of this film is just so amazing as well, with a very gothic look for the castle and the main neighbourhood having all these pastel colours. The family that takes in Edward is so great as well, and it's so fun seeing Edward trying to fit in to society with his scissor hands. I do think maybe the town turned on him a bit suddenly, and I'm not the biggest fan of the flash forwards with the old Winona Ryder, but overall it comes together to make another really great Tim Burton film. I give it a 9. And then I watched If. This surprised me a lot, actually. I expected this to be an extremely cringe and awkward film that would just feel a bit babyish. That's what I got from the trailers anyway, but what I got was a very charming, wholesome, in a good way film. I like how creative all these imaginary creatures are and how they interact with each other, and Ryan Reynolds really does suit his character as this depressed guy who's head of this society. I do think there are some moments that get a bit overly cheesy, but overall there's some really good cheese in here that I couldn't help but smile at. There's some moments in here that actually got me a bit emotional with how whimsical and innocent it all felt. There was a big twist in here that wasn't actually a twist at all, and I pretty much caught what was going on an hour before it happened. And also this subplot about the main character's dad, played by John Krasinski, dying of a broken heart or whatever, and I thought that whole subplot was a little bit forced, and it was trying to have this dramatic payoff that didn't work at all. But overall it's a solid left turn to family films from John Krasinski as a director. So yeah, I give it a 7. And then watched Thelma and Louise. This is a very interesting film from Ridley Scott. This film really shows that he knows how to deal with women protagonists, along with obviously Ripley in Alien. But this film is extremely women-centric and deals with a lot of problems that women primarily face, like rape and catcalling. I really like the two main protagonists of Thelma and Louise and the trouble they manage to get themselves into, and that trouble keeps just escalating and escalating. The ending of this film was actually spoiled for me from the celebrity goggle box of all things, but in the context of this film it has a large impact. I give it an 8.5. And then I watched the pop out Ken and Friends. I had to watch Kendrick's section of the set, and it was just phenomenal. I become a pretty big Kendrick fan over the years, and obviously I was aware of the beef going on between him and Drake. I had to watch this, and I just felt like this was the final nail in the coffin. All the guests he brought out were great, most notably Dr. Dre, who was just really one of the great founders of the hip-hop genre in the 90s. Kendrick's energy is just always so great in these live shows. I watched Kendrick at Glastonbury and his last Amazon Prime performance, and he has so much great energy when it comes to his rapping, and he kind of radiates that energy onto the audiences. And it's just amazing seeing the audience singing tracks like Not Like Us word for word. It was just an amazing performance. I give it a 10. And then watched Raging Bull. I decided to go back to a bit of Scorsese with this film, and overall I really liked it. It felt a bit like Rocky if it started in his prime and he was slightly mentally insane. This film works as a really great tragedy that focuses on Robert De Niro's insane performance in this film. It's unbelievable that he committed to this role as much as he did and gained and lost so much weight. There's so much scenes in here that have an unbelievable amount of directorial flair in here, especially during the boxing scenes, and it just adds to the weight of a lot of things, especially when this main character's life takes a turn for the worse. It's like you can pinpoint the exact moment when things take a turn, and that's something that I haven't really seen a lot of other directors pull off, where they can really communicate a turn in a story through such vivid, like, visual imagery. I really like how emotionally flawed this character is as well, and how he manages to push all these people away from him, even though they were the people he needed the most. Yeah, it's just a very great tragedy. I give it a 9. And then I watched Shutter Island. This is another perfect Scorsese film in my opinion. It includes probably the best performance I've seen from Leo, and just such an interesting story that just hits you with twist after twist after twist. I'm not gonna lie, I did kind of see the twist coming, but when everything was revealed, it just made me rethink everything we saw before, which is a sign of a good twist in my opinion. The last 20 minutes of this film is also extremely devastating and just hits so hard because of how much we as an audience trusted this main character. The dream sequences in this film are great as well, and are edited kind of like an actual dream, with objects suddenly appearing and backgrounds changing. I really like how it just took you into the mind of this main character, and again, after experiencing that twist, it just makes me want to go back and rewatch all these moments again. I give it a 10. And then watch Blade Runner 2049. This is a really great legacy sequel that I think is nearly as good as the first. I think this film is slightly ruined for me due to the Ryan Gosling Sigma edits, and it did take me out of the film a bit, but overall I was really invested. I like how it deals with what it means to be a replicant and how much humanity can be in something that is artificially created. I found that aspect really interesting. You've also got some really great visuals in here similar to the first, and I really love this world, so it's just great seeing it built out even more. The colour grading in here is really stand out as well, and the different colours here kind of represent the different parts of this world. I think it's sometimes a bit out of place when legacy characters are brought into a legacy sequel, but Deckard really fits into the story really well, and he gets some really great character development that we didn't get much of in the original. I give it an 8.5. And then I finished watching Smiling Friends Season 2. This is almost as good as the first season. Again, I've never seen this type of humour on TV before, and it's just humour that works really well for me. Charlie and Pim are just such great characters to follow. They contrast each other very well, and the absolutely mad things that happen to them in each episode are just so fun to follow. Every time an episode comes out, it just feels like an event as well. Like when I look on social media, there's just constant memes and jokes made from each episode after it airs. I also can't get enough of the clashing of animation styles. It's just so great seeing like stop motion and rotoscoping and CGI being used, the different characters in this world. Yeah, I just still love this show after another season. It's a 9. And then I watched The Boy and the Heron. This film finally came to digital, so I had to give it a watch because I was desperate to see it. And I just think it's a really great final film for Miyazaki that really did deserve the Oscar. First of all, I forgot how unbelievably good the animation for Studio Ghibli films are, and there's just some moments in here where I was just almost hypnotised by the visuals. The plot is very outlandish, which is very regular for a Miyazaki film, but manages to tie its story to real life really well and represent life and death in very interesting ways. I think it has that very lore heavy epic feeling of Princess Mononoke, which I wasn't the biggest fan of and I really wanted to like, but it balances that out with Miyazaki's signature charm, which I felt like that film was missing again. Yeah, and it's now in my top 10 films for Miyazaki. I give it a 9. And then I watched Inner Violent Nature. This is a film that I heard very mixed things about going in, but I ended up thinking it was a really well done film. It just has a very interesting concept, with it basically being something like a Friday the 13th slasher, but from the killer's perspective. I really like the stylized nature of this film and how there are these like really wide angle shots from a long distance away that let you really take in the surroundings whilst also making some kills more disturbing, as you don't know what is going on and it leaves more to the imagination. I get why people find this boring, but I was just on edge the entire runtime. The kills in here were just absolutely insane, along with some amazing practical effects and a very ruthless killer. The third act did confuse me a bit in its direction, but I definitely respect that choice by the end. It's just a very unique horror. I give it an 8. And then the final thing I watched this month was Glastonbury. I only watched a few performances. Obviously I couldn't watch the whole thing because there's like a million performances and a lot of bands I didn't really care about that much, but I did obviously tune in to some sets that I was very interested in. We got Danny Brown first. I thought this was a really solid set, but I felt like he was lacking a little bit of energy, I'm not gonna lie. Then I watched Keen. This was just a really great standout set with the lead singer Tom Chaplin just sounding as good as he did 20 years ago. And then I watched Little Sims. This was just another very solid set start to finish, and I thought the Drop 7 songs, which I wasn't the biggest fan of, I think they sounded way better live than they do on that EP. And then I watched Coldplay. This is probably the best set out of all of them. It's just such a standout, just massive, expansive set. The audience involvement was great. It's 2 hours long, so they managed to cram in as many songs as they could, really. And even though they played some stinkers, like something just like this, or the BTS song, I think they could outbalance the bad. I thought Michael J. Fox coming out was just so great as well. I just love that man. And then finally I watched Jessie Ware. I think the set was targeted a little bit too much towards gay people, which is not a bad thing, but it did get very camp at points. She did play all my favourites from her though, along with a new track that I enjoyed as well. So, and then another thing that I think I should just cram in the end of this video is that I've also finished reading Invincible. I started reading these all the way back at the end of 2021, and I finally completed the main run, excluding all the spin-off stuff. But I thought it's just a phenomenal run. It's the only comic run that I've ever read, but I heard it's one of the best, so I ended up buying all the compendiums and reading the whole thing. Obviously the show has only tackled a section of the comic so far, and I do think there are some aspects that are adapted better in the show than in the comics, as they really have longer to delve into the story in the show. Obviously they have multiple seasons, but I just really love where the story goes in this run, and it ends basically perfectly. There were some aspects of the run that introduced like a really interesting concept, but then moved on to it fairly quickly, and I did want it to get explored a little bit more, especially a time travel plot that was introduced that really intrigued me, but they kind of just like left it and forgot about it, which kind of disappointed me a little bit. But I just really love these comics. Yeah, they're just great. They're just great. I'm glad I've finished them and completed them all. I'm actually moving on to Stan Lee's like original runner Spider-Man comics now. I've picked these up on Amazon and I'm reading through these now. That is all I watched in the month of June 2024. I plan to focus this month as much as I can on TV stuff. I will watch the odd film here and there, I think, especially new films that I'm really interested in seeing. But as I said at the start of the video, I'm a little bit burnt out on end of month videos, and that is why I think I'm going to take a break from end of month videos, which I haven't done in ever, I don't think. But I've been doing this series since the middle of 2021, and now it's the middle of 2024, so I've been doing this for 3 years now. I haven't stopped. I do want to take a bit of a break from these videos because they do take a lot of time to work on, and that time could be spent working on other videos on this channel that I'm a little bit more passionate about and I'm more excited about working on. So if you want to see my opinions on the films that I'm reviewing this month, next month, then just check out my letterboxd. Obviously I rate every film I do on there. If you want to check out my opinions on series, then you can follow my serialized, where I post opinions on there as well. So I do plan to return to end of month videos in October, I think, because that is obviously the spooky season and I want to try and watch a bunch of horror films for October. So yeah, I will return for October, but for now, yeah, I'm taking a break. Bye.